You're listening to the Nourished Child podcast, episode number 24, Childhood Food Insecurity and Affordable Food with Clancy Harrison. Did you know that 1 in 5 children in America are food insecure? Today, I speak with Clancy Harrison, registered dietitian and food insecurity expert, about the impact of food insecurity on children in terms of their growth, development, and social experiences. Clancy Harrison is a registered dietitian and a food insecurity expert on a mission to transform the way healthcare professionals and parents approach childhood nutrition. A catalyst for social change, Clancy challenges outdated feeding practices and ignites the discussion of food access for all children. Combining her basic principles of dignifying food assistance programs with encouraging children to experience a variety of foods through sensory exploration has the power to transform the health of our next generation. Clancy is a sought-after speaker for congressional briefings, live TV segments, and professional seminars. Her ability to fuse empathy, storytelling, and statistics gives her audiences permission to experience profound shifts in their perceptions of food insecurity, open up about their own experiences, and make positive changes in their own practices and circumstances. Her mission to eradicate barriers and demolish stigma around food assistance programs places her on the cutting edge of research implementation and advocacy. Clancy is an award-winning author of Feeding Baby, founder of the Children Feeding Children Greenhouse Project, a frequent guest on the WNEP live morning show, and a TEDx speaker. She served as past president of Northeast Pennsylvania Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and the Owl Beach West Side Food Pantry. Recently, Clancy received the distinction as a fellow of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So let's not wait any further and let's get talking to Clancy.
Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey, Clancy, welcome to the Nourished Child podcast.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me, Jill.
I'm so glad you're here. We have been talking about getting you on this show for quite some time. I'm so glad you could find some time in your very busy schedule to join me. I'm excited to talk about affordable food for hungry kids. I've been following your work, and in fact, we could even tell the story of how we met, which is really around public policy and advocating for children and childhood nutrition. So why don't we start there? I'd love my audience to be able to know you a little bit better and understand how you got into this area of nutrition.
Sure. Well, I was the past president of the Owl Beach West Side Food Pantry for a couple years, and that basically started because my kids' school has a strong partnership with that food pantry, and it was right across the street from their school. So it was very convenient for me to start volunteering, and as a dietitian, I love food, and I love to help other people have access to food. So it was just the perfect opportunity for me to jump in and volunteer.
Which is great. And then let's just reminisce for a second and talk about how we met. I know that I remember first meeting you at Fancy. You were in the audience. Marianne Jacobson, who is the co-author of Fearless Feeding with me, she and I were presenting about infant feeding trends, I think was our topic we were presenting about. And that was the very first time I met you.
Yes.
You had just come out with your Feeding Baby book.
I did. That was the year I launched it.
Yeah. And then we got sort of connected through public policy. There was and I'm really reaching back into the cobwebs of my brain here.
Yeah, I think what I always do a lot of posts on what we're doing at the food pantry because I'm just so proud that we can do some of the great work that we do, such as providing fresh produce to our clients. And so I had that on Facebook a lot. And you and I would interact, and you reach out to me to see if I would be willing to interview people for Community Voices.
That's right. And you were so ready and able and productive, if I remember correctly. You cranked out some massive interviews and you were on it. You were such a star.
Yeah, 5 people were selected nationally to go to Congress, and 2 of my interviews went to Congress, and I was one of them.
Oh, yeah. So impressive. Okay. So for our audience today, we're talking about affordable food for hungry kids, and really we're talking about food insecurity. And let's just sort of split hairs for a second. What is the difference between hunger and food insecurity, or is there any difference at all?
Oh, there's definitely a difference, and I get this question a lot. People think I'm using very fancy terms when I say food insecurity, but I like to remind people we all know what hunger feels like. We can all imagine a time in our life, probably yesterday or maybe even now, where our stomach is starting to growl. We might become irritable, frustrated, we might become tired, and those are all examples of feelings that we have when we're hungry. They're physical and emotional cues that we feel. Food insecurity is really, we have those feelings, but we don't have the privilege to determine when we are going to get our next meal, or maybe our next food might not be a high quality food. So we might be opting for instant noodles or canned pasta over something fresh, and we're going to be missing out those vital nutrients and minerals in our food. Mm-hmm. So that's how I explain it to people.
That's a good explanation.
Yeah, it's really hard for us to measure from a scientific community hunger because we all have different experiences with those hunger pains. But food insecurity we can measure, and that is our access to food, the amount, and the quality of food.
Okay, and so then that begs the question, what are the current rates of food insecurity, particularly since this is a child-focused show, particularly among children?
Sure. Nationally, there are over 13 million children who do not know where their next meal is coming from. They might be going to school hungry, unable to concentrate. So 13 million is approximately 1 in 5 children in the United States. And those numbers can vary within your own community. I know in my hometown, it's much worse, where our poverty rate is 1 in 3 children and food insecurity rate is 1 in 4 children.
And that's pretty widespread in terms of that variation across the country.
Correct.
Yeah. So when we are looking at children who are food insecure, what kind of consequences are we talking about? And I really, if you can reach into not only just the nutrition consequences, but maybe even some of the other social, emotional consequences that occur when children are living in a food insecure environment.
Yeah, we should go back to our feelings of how we feel when we're hungry, and imagine sitting in school, having your stomach growling, having maybe a headache or feeling frustrated. You might be angry or mad. I always ask people, would you be able to concentrate on what the teacher's saying? Do you think you would pass your spelling test? Do you think that you would have good grades, or maybe have even behavior problems, which is what we actually see in school? We see children they're not able to do their best academic performance, and they might have behavior problems. Right now I'm currently talking to a lot of teachers, asking them if they can identify those students who are food insecure, and if they knew, they could give them a granola bar and their behavior problems would just go away. And that seems to be a recurring episode that I see with teachers in their classroom. Besides not being able to concentrate and failing in school, we are going to see malnutrition. So adolescent boys will have lower bone density. We will also see iron deficiency in the children, calcium deficiencies. And the first 3 years, particularly in life, are so important for establishing that good foundation of a healthy body that's going to have implication for the child's future, such as physical and mental health, academic achievement, and even later on in life, their economic productivity in the United States.
Wow, those are pretty far-reaching consequences. I know for myself, my feelings of hunger, I recognize the physical signs of hunger very well, but I also know that when I am hungry, I have a really hard time being loving and kind and patient. And I think that if I, as an adult who have, full faculties and pretty good control over my emotional responses and my own food environment, I can't, it's so compelling to sit and think about children who have absolutely no control over that. If I can't be loving and kind and patient, what are children experiencing when they are hungry?
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
I never looked at it in those terms, but definitely.
Oh, you can ask my husband. He always knows when I'm hungry.
Me too. Yeah.
He'll say, Jill, it's time to eat.
Yeah.
Okay. There are so many misconceptions about food insecurity, and you even have been very vocal about your own misconceptions and perceptions of food insecurity. So let's sort of talk about that a little bit from your perspective, and then let's go into what the real truths and realities are.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I did write my book, Feeding Baby. And when I wrote that book, this was prior to my volunteer at the food pantry. While I spent the majority of my life fighting childhood hunger because I've worked with the National School Lunch Program as a food service director and a lot of nonprofits, I thought I understood what hunger was and I thought I was empathetic. But when I wrote my book, I wrote it in terms of what I was doing and what I was blinded by my own privilege. I have the opportunity to decide if I want to feed my children organic food, if I want to make fresh foods. It never really occurred to me that people are struggling every single day, even though I worked in the fields, which is ironic, I think. Mm-hmm. So when I started working at the food pantry and I would see a mom come in and we would have maybe yogurt donated and that yogurt would have blue dye in it. And the mother was so thankful and so excited to the point of tears that she was able to give her child yogurt, even though it had food coloring in it, food coloring that I even went so far to call poisonous in my book. That's when it hit me that why are we demonizing certain foods when food is really food? And I'm very passionate now in bringing dignity to all food and stopping the stigma around food assistance programs such as food pantries or the National School Lunch Programs, and even in social media how we talk about food. I think we could choose better words when describing foods. Certainly there are foods that are a healthier option, but we don't need to use fear-mongering to get our point across.
I totally agree. I'm sort of tired of the whole toxic versus clean versus just the labels that unfortunately alienate people to a certain degree. Even, whether they're food insecure or not, there are plenty of people in America that make the choices that they make because those are the choices they can make or want to make. And so alienating people with moral judgment about food is a tough one for me too. But particularly as it relates to people who don't have the types of choices necessarily that allows them to make different choices. So when we talk about some of these misconceptions, what would you say are the most common ones that you hear?
Okay, I'm just going to be extremely transparent. So the day that I heard the opportunity to be a president of the food pantry, in my mind, now understand I'm a type A, I have to follow the rules, and I get upset when other people don't follow rules. That's just my personality. So in my mind, I said to myself, Clancy, there are going to be people coming into the food pantry who are going to take advantage of the program. And you have to promise yourself, if you know that you're helping at least one person out of 10, don't get upset or mad at the other people. And I gave myself, when I made that promise to myself in a very personal, internal way, I went on to become the president, and every day I learned something new. I can tell you after 5 years, I still learn something new every day. The biggest stigma or the biggest misconception out there, I think, and I'm I feel very comfortable saying in a humble way, in an embarrassing way, that even I thought that people would take advantage of the program. We have over 600 families registered. I've only met one person who was a drug addict. I don't know of anyone who has taken advantage of the program. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We see a lot of people who are coming in running from domestic violence. We have elderly, disabled people. We also have mentally ill. We have veterans coming in, a lot of single moms. I've even had one day, which I tell this story often, I had a gentleman come in and he was wearing a suit. And I'm sitting there. He asked me who was in charge. I told him I did, and I thought immediately I was going to get a very nice donation for the food pantry. And what turns out, when I told him I was in charge, he held his head low and he said he's been looking for a job for a couple months. He has 3 kids and he can't go home empty-handed. And right there, my heart sunk, and it was just another aha moment that we can't assume that even if someone drives up in a Lexus to ask for food, they're not there taking advantage of the program. And we've seen people, maybe Alexis is an extreme example, but we've seen people come with nice cars. And you have to understand, the other misconception out there is that poverty in the United States is more situational than it is chronic, meaning that we see people in and out of poverty because of a temporary situation such as a job loss. And you cannot eat a nice car. It takes a while to liquidate that. But we have to eat food within a couple days, right? So I think those are the main misconceptions, is thinking people are going to take advantage, and then that majority of the people in the United States are from generational poverty. It's not true. It's situational poverty or situational circumstances.
And when you say situational, that basically means that eventually they'll come out from this situation and get back on their feet. And that's what food insecurity assistance programs really are designed to do, right?
Definitely. They are for a temporary situation, and people rely on them, and they get on their feet and they move forward. And we see this all the time. The gentleman that came in, he since has received a job. He found a job. He moved out of the our area, our local area. And in fact, he did come back dressed in a suit, and he gave us a donation. And he said, "Thank you so much, because I didn't know what to do, and I needed you at this point." And I think we always see those people coming back and giving back to our food pantry, whether it's through money or volunteering. And to see that and to know where I was prior has been very eye-opening and a personal learning and growth experience for me, not only personally, but I would say professionally, because my professional mission has obviously changed.
And so what is that now?
My professional mission?
Yeah.
My professional mission is to fight hunger with dignity.
Good for you. I love that. And I feel your passion and know your passion, and I don't think there could be a better person beating the drum for this. And I'm really proud of your transparency too. It's not always easy to admit that you had preconceptions, and boy, though, you were open to learning a different way and a new way to think about things. And I think that in and of itself is a very strong message to send to anyone listening to the show, is that we all have preconceived ideas about just about everything in the world. And if we find that we have preconceived ideas about food insecurity, I hope that this show today changes some of that. And even just listening to your experience, Clancy, and how you were open to understand a different way, I think is something that my listeners can most definitely benefit from.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Every day it's something new. Every day you learn something new. It's just being open and receptive to that.
Exactly. The world is here to teach us stuff, right?
Right.
Just again, for the listeners to understand how we address food insecurity in America. And this question is really more about, give us an idea or an overview of the different types of programs that are available for children and their families to address food insecurity?
Sure. So we have something that I think everyone's pretty much familiar with, food stamps. Now it's called SNAP. Parents have access to that. They would obviously have to apply for it, and it's based on income level. Mm-hmm. There's also in the school, there's school feeding programs. So we have school breakfast that's available. It should be at most schools, hopefully. Mm-hmm. School breakfast, school lunch, after school snack are great. They're wonderful programs, and every day we have dietitians and school nutrition professionals working hard to make sure that there are healthy options available for those students. In the summer, which is something I really think we need to start paying more attention to, we have the summer feeding program, and that is really put in place for the children who are relying on school lunch and school breakfast to be able to have a meal in the summer. Unfortunately, we are not seeing a high participation rate in this summer feeding program. That's when hunger is really at the all-time high for children. And that could be maybe because we don't have enough volunteers through our local organizations that's hosting the summer feeding program. Maybe people aren't aware of them, or maybe we just haven't established that in our town. So I think that's definitely something we should pay attention to. Mm-hmm. There's also Women, Infant, and Children, which is WIC, and that is for mothers who have young children to receive additional benefits of food.
Right. And then you're also involved, well, obviously you've talked about the food bank, and there's lots of food banks around statewide. But you also mentioned, I don't think you did mention actually, but I know you're involved in the Misericordia program for women. So why don't you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. Misericordia University is in northeastern Pennsylvania in a little town called Dallas, PA, and they're one of 8 universities that do what they do, but they're also the only university that provides free housing for women who are single mothers. They can have up to 2 children, and they get a 4-year degree with grants. There's financial help with that. What they really get is their housing. They live in a house setting. They have the kitchen, the living room. They live with other single moms. And they get to stay year-round. They don't have to go home at Christmas. Most of these women don't have a home to go to at Christmas. That is their new home. And so they get to live there for 4 years and not have to worry about housing or any other bills that come with living expenses. And then I also work with them. I consult with them and help make sure that they have access to food. So we're actually seeing with this program, the women are fighting and ending poverty 2 generations at a time. The original women in the program, their children are off into college now. So they see their mom getting a college degree, and they know that going through kindergarten, grade school, high school is the answer, education into college. So it's really exciting to see this happening and knowing I have this gym in my backyard.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I wish more universities would take on this type of program. And anybody out there with a university working in the area of food and nutrition, this would be an awesome thing to get started at your university. Even if you could give back to a handful of young women with children in your community, what a difference that can make.
It's a major difference. Most single moms who attempt college would take them 9 years to complete because of their roles as a mother. In this program, they do it in 4 years. And most women who are single moms don't ever get that college degree because they have other things that they have to take care of.
Too many obstacles. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is really great. So there are several programs that we have available in America to address food insecurity for children and adults. But what is going on in the current climate of our government? I just read something about the child nutrition reauthorization. Is that tabled, or what's happening?
It sounds like it's tabled, and that they're going to be hopefully readdressing it. But for right now, they're not moving forward, which is kind of sad. And so the child reauthorization is really when we look at our programs and try to improve the nutrition requirements of them.
And
so
cement.
Fingers crossed.
Right. And we cement the funding for them.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So when we're talking about these food assistance programs, what really needs to happen to ensure these programs remain alive, available to those who need them?
I am going to probably take a more realistic approach. There will probably be people who disagree with me or probably agree and say we need to also do more. But from what I see just from my personal transformation, what I see from the transformation of our volunteers, and even when we went at the volunteers at the food pantry, and even when we went to Congress, I think we have vital programs in place. But for some reason, we have people that we have to fight against to secure funding, to make the programs healthier. And I think in order to make this where it's not a bipartisan issue, and I really believe in my heart that we need to end the stigma associated with food assistance, and we need to understand that it's more situational than it is chronic. Mm-hmm. And I think when people can acknowledge this and realize, I can tell you after every time I speak on the public scale to healthcare professionals, I always have someone, more than one person, either come up to me right after or I get an email saying, you know what, I went home and I was talking to my spouse about what you were saying with food insecurity, and I just learned that my husband was on food stamps his whole life. We're not having these conversations in our own home and sharing because the stigma, the shame, unfortunately, that's associated with these programs keeps us from having open dialogue. I learned that someone very close to me was on food stamps at one point in his life, and it was shocking to me. And he's been in my life for 30 years. And for me, I just really feel that we need to start having these conversations. And when people have used the programs, they often say it was for a temporary situation. It helped me in a time of need. I don't know what I would have done without it. I'm thankful it's there, but I don't want people to know. And when I was doing my interviews, I had a lot of people come out of the woodwork saying, Clancy, I want to share my story, but you can't take it public and you're not going to take it to Congress, but I just want to share it with you because what you're doing is important. But what they can do and what everyone can do, if you've ever been on the National School Lunch Program, just think about how it helped you and how it helped you pass that spelling test. You were able to graduate. You're the individual you are today. And when we can look at it as a powerful resource with dignity and pride and talk about it that way and view it as a hand up, not a hand out, I think we might start changing the views of anyone who might be fighting against these programs. Mm-hmm. And we might have a different dialogue. So that's where I am from a professional standpoint, is trying to change the mindset of the way food assistance is perceived in the United States along with those misconceptions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love hand up, not hand out. I love that line. I think that's so powerful. And I again, just to sort of reiterate the situational nature of food insecurity, situations where they're out of your control. If you have no income, you have no income. If you can't buy food. And the other thing that strikes me as you were talking and I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, we are always so happy at this time of year to give gifts to children in need, but we're not happy to endorse and fight for food. Just that daily, as you said, dignity of making sure, particularly for children, which is my hot spot, but making sure those bellies are full and those kids have the nutrition that they need so their brains are developing and they're growing and they can be all that they potentially can be.
Right.
If you had to revamp or remodel any of the programs that are in place, what, is there a wish list you have just based on your experience as it is right now where you would like to see things change? I know with WIC, there is talk about expanding the program benefits to children age 6 as opposed to where it is currently right now at age 5, which I think is a fabulous idea. And I support that. But are there other programs or gaps within programs that you think should be remodeled?
In all honesty, I haven't been a part of those programs in a long time directly, except with the food banks and food pantries where I am now. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's really right now in my scope of practice because I'm not a food service director anymore. I know that making sure, and maybe a lot of parents don't realize some of the changes that have been made with even in the National School Lunch Program. You think of us as adults who have kids now. And when we were children, you would see food, reimbursed meals, free meals. They would all have lunch tickets, and it was very identifiable. I can tell you that one of the main reasons why people do not participate in food assistance program is that stigma that I was talking about. And I think if we can assure parents now that it's computerized and no one knows if someone's getting a free lunch or a reduced meal, that might help more parents sign up their child for the program. And I guess that really goes back to that whole concept of reducing the stigma and getting that education out there. One thing that we changed at our food pantry based on that is I had a lot of slack for it, but we have a bi-weekly farmers market. So every Tuesday and Friday we do a farmers market. I made that open to anyone. So that includes volunteers, myself. You will see me packing up a bag of produce and bringing it home. I don't need to get my produce from there. I've been told that I'm stealing from the poor, but what we're doing is making it a community resource where we're putting food dignity into it. It's putting our volunteers and our participants on an even playing field where we now see recipe sharing, we see more conversation. People are holding their heads high when they walk into our food pantry because they know that I'm going to be standing on the other end or other volunteers, and we are talking about how we're going to make our carrots that night, and we're each packing our bag. So that's just a small example of adding dignity back into these programs. And when we think about dignity, that even if you think about how we can have dignity with SNAP, that's making sure people have the right to choose what they use their SNAP dollars for. That's a very important piece with dignity and with WIC too. So I will always go back to that, definitely.
So that leads me to sort of shifting into the affordability conversation and whether, a healthy diet for kids is the same across the board, whether it's whether you're food secure or food insecure. But affordability becomes the big driving factor if you have limited dollars or limited resources. So how can parents, and I know you've done a lot of work with affordable meals, how can parents make sure their children are getting balanced meals when they are living with limited resources?
Sure. I think it's really important for parents to be able to identify the foods that pack the most nutrition that for the least amount of money. So, for example, I love eggs. The average egg in the United States can cost about 15 cents. So for 15 cents, a parent can get 6 grams of protein and 13 vitamins and minerals, which is amazing, 15 cents. I think identifying, now obviously your eggs are going to change in price based off of where you live. If you want to buy organic,
right?
But on average, the cost would be 15 cents per egg. A medium potato, that is something, for some reason our potatoes just get a really bad rap. I don't know why, maybe because it is a carbohydrate. But
oh boy, don't say that word.
I know. But a medium potato packs up to almost 50% the RDA of vitamin C, the daily allowance of vitamin C in a medium potato.
Love it.
And kids love potatoes, but we might need to rethink how we prepare those potatoes. And the great thing about potatoes, they're very versatile. So they can go with any meal, and you can make them in so many different ways. And you're going to get not only vitamin C, but potassium. We do want to encourage people to consume the peel. That's where some of the nutrients are, a lot of the nutrients, and fiber. Just one more kid favorite, it seems to be corn, is also tends to get a bad rap too. But 1 cup of corn has 16 grams of protein and is a very affordable food. So just being able to identify those. I also have noticed a trend that if something is not fresh, and something being fruits and vegetables, it's highly perceived fresh fruits and vegetables have the best nutrition and health value. The perception of canned and frozen drops significantly among people. So I think as dietitians, healthcare professionals, parents, we need to really talk about frozen and canned produce fitting into a healthy diet. And certainly we want to opt for foods that do not have added salt or added sugar to them. But when we can afford most likely canned and frozen produce. Plus, it's not going to go bad. Think about how many people stand in line. They're on the next smoothie diet, and they have all this fresh produce, and they tend to just throw it out the window after spending $200. So if we can really talk about canned and frozen fitting in a healthy diet, that's also going to help. One resource that I helped put together for the Egg Nutrition Center is actually a list of the most healthy and affordable foods.
Love that.
Yeah.
And where can people get that?
Well, hopefully we can put it in the link with your
the show notes. Absolutely. That would be great, because as you started talking about eggs and potatoes and corn, I was sitting here thinking, wow, we need a list of like the top 10 nutrient-dense, affordable foods, and I'm sure beans go on there, and milk, and there's some other really great foods. And by the way, for almost all my youth sports athletes, I am always encouraging them to eat corn and potatoes and green peas if they like them, again, because it's such a great starchy carbohydrate for the athlete as well, and full, as you said, of protein and nutrition. I think people forget that there are certain vegetables that are really good sources of protein.
Definitely.
So when you work on your affordable meal plans, I know you've done a couple of those. How do you go about making those? What sort of is your thought process? Do you say, okay, step 1, I'm going to include this. Step 2, I'm going to do this. How do you come about making those? And I'm asking because I do have a lot of healthcare professionals who listen to this show, and I think it would be really helpful for them to sort of pick your brain as to how you're coming up with these recipes and what's sort of the criteria for the foods that you're including and how you're putting them together.
Sure. So my number one is that people can afford it, and it is as healthy as possible. The menus are actually made with the Women's with Children's program at Misericordia. In fact, I'm going to be cooking Monday night with one woman, and we're going to be putting together a meal plan for her. And what we really do is we strive to make meat. So we might buy one chicken, and that one chicken is going to feed her and her daughter for the entire week. And we use it as a flavoring. We don't use it as the center. So we will make, for her, it's just her and her little daughter, we could probably make 6 meals out of one chicken for the 2 of them. If you have a family of 4, you can make 2 to 3 meals. So when we put those together, we buy the meat and we use it as, and that's if someone we're going to be making a vegetarian one soon. So it doesn't have to necessarily be meat, but we try to extend that product into other meals for flavor. The other thing that we do is we use the same ingredients to make multiple meals, and that just comes from my restaurant food service background. I know that if I'm meal planning and I need to cut my cost, the more I can make using the same ingredients is going to cut that cost, and that's the same within the house, within a family. So for one meal plan, we're going to be making chicken and rice, and then we might make a rice casserole with spinach and cheese. So that rice is going to be that staple for that week, and then the next week we'll add a different variety. based on what that person likes and what they're actually going to eat. That's another big piece. We spend a lot of time talking about what you like and what you don't like, because I don't want to try to create something that's, new and trendy if you're not going to eat it. And it needs to be something that you're going to like. Mm-hmm. So I think using meat as a flavoring and using the same recipes to make other meals are key to cutting costs in our meal plans.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And do you have a free guide or a meal plan guide that you've developed? I feel like I saw that somewhere.
I do. It's linked. I have a menu planning email course. I think there's about 5 emails, and it talks about food waste, using your leftovers strategically and making the next meal. And then you get access at the end, I think that 5th email, you have access to all the meal plans that I have created for the women. And with those meal plans are shopping lists for grocery store, and also strategies and tips for cooking we're busy. We live a hectic life, and we want to make sure that we are being as efficient as we can in the kitchen. So there are tips to save time as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, it sounds like a great resource, and I'll be sure to include a link so that people can sign up for that email series. That sounds terrific.
Yeah.
So, Clancy, you're such a great inspirational role model for what a dietetics or a nutrition professional or medical professional or nursing professional or any kind of healthcare professional, and even just your run-of-the-mill mom or dad or just American in this country can do to make a change in hunger and food insecurity. If you could leave the audience with one thought or one takeaway or one course of action or a challenge, what would it be?
I wish nothing more that people understood the power of their words. So whether you're talking positive or negative, your words are very powerful. And you never know who they could hurt or help. Hopefully we choose to help. And what I ask for people to do is, after listening to this podcast, is maybe to just start to take a look around and listen to the stories around you. If you're someone who has ever experienced food insecurity and might have been on some type of food assistance program, as hard as this challenge would be, maybe first it's thinking back to how it was a very big benefit for you and how you are the person you are today, and maybe even consider what you would have looked like, what you would look like now if you didn't have access to that food at that time. And if you are willing to start talking about how it helped you with pride and dignity, and be proud that you were able to have the opportunity to participate with the food assistance program, because it's a great thing. And I think finally, just understanding that food insecurity and poverty is not caused by generational circumstances. In most cases, it's situational. And I think once we can identify with that and understand any one of us at any moment in time can find ourselves in a life-changing situation, a divorce, the death of a family member, being laid off, all of these can set us backwards and into a place where we might be reaching out and needing food. So I think that was a lot of ideas that I'm asking your audience to leave with, but I think that I want to hit on everyone too, because some of those might not apply to everyone.
Well, definitely. I am sure a lot of wheels are spinning in a lot of listeners' heads. It's been so wonderful to talk to you. And again, I feel your heart and passion for this. And I think anybody listening can feel your heart and passion for it as well. And I know that you're truly making a difference. And I know my listeners are going to want to be able to find you and all your resources. So tell us how we can do that.
Sure. They can just go to clancyharrison.com. Clancy is Clancy. Harrison, Harrison. So clancyharrison.com. And actually from that source, you can link into, if you want to get into infant feeding, or there's a link to my affordable Cooking with Clancy website. So that kind of gives you the place to go different directions.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Clancy, it's been so nice to have you on the show today. I really appreciate your time and your insight, and wishing you just all the best for the year to come, and hoping you make big dents in this movement towards getting all kinds of people who are food insecure secure again in their lives.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. That's a wrap, folks. You can find the show notes for today's show over on my website, www.jillcastle.com/024. That's 024 for episode number 24. And if you enjoyed the show or want to offer some feedback or comments, be sure to do that over at the show notes. There's a box at the bottom where you can share your thoughts and comments there. As always, you can find the Nourished Child podcast on iTunes and Android. Subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode. It's the easiest way to make sure that you get weekly or now every other week updates on your phone. Just put the Nourished Child or Jill Castle in the search box and voila, I will come up and you can subscribe to the show right there. Or if you prefer to just listen on my website, head over to www.jillcastle.com/podcast and you can listen to the show right there. Hope you'll have a wonderful week. As always, grab that child in your life today and give them a loving squeeze. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.